Number 4, James Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Revenue and reads, what estimates, if any, does he have for the total amount of tax multinational companies operating in New Zealand may have avoided paying in the last tax year through incorrect transfer pricing practices?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, Inland Revenue does not distinguish between companies based on whether they are multinational or not. This is because we expect all companies to pay the correct amount of tax regardless of where they are owned. But to the extent that incorrect transfer pricing practices are identified by Inland Revenue, they would be disallowed.
Supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Is Herald investigative journalist Matt Nippett's figure of $500 million of lost tax revenue from multinationals in the last financial year about right, or is tax expert Professor Craig Eliff's estimate of $1 billion more accurate?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Well, Mr Speaker, both estimates are speculative based on their value judgments about what companies with that level of turnover should pay. It's not IRD's job to estimate based on gross turnover. As I'm sure the member is aware, the amount of tax paid is assessed on the taxable profit, and that's what they paid.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
So is the Minister of Revenue saying he has less of an idea about how much revenue is being lost than Matt Nippett and Craig Eliff?
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
I should hope so. But look, if the member is saying this does not look right or does not look fair, I have some sympathy for that point of view. But what is considered unfair is multinationals not paying tax anywhere in the world, and for that reason this is a global issue that requires a global response. I think the OECD is the best place in which to have that analysis.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Given that Inland Revenue advised his office in 2013 that, quote, we will be closely involved in and guided by the OECD work, however, this does not prevent us from addressing potential deficiencies in our own rules, which we have concerns about, end quote. Why is he still to address these deficiencies in our own tax rules?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, I don't accept that they haven't been addressed to the degree that there are robust tax policies already in place for the establishment of rules around permanent establishment and for the unfair transfer pricing for the purpose of avoiding tax. I think we have a really good tax policy framework. The government invested nearly $20 million in last year's budget for the audit and compliance work that needs to go on in those large businesses, and I think we have a good system.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Well, given that answer, Mr Speaker, how many staff at Inland Revenue currently work on base erosion and profit shifting to address multinational tax avoidance?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, I don't have that specific number to hand, but I'd be very happy to get it to the member if he wants to put that question down in writing.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
Well then, will he introduce new law, like Australia have recently, to better police multinationals, to require greater transparency and to collect a fair share of tax revenue from them?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, the member is referring to laws that have been passed in both the UK and Australia on what's known as diverted profits tax, which requires which disallows arrangements where foreign companies exploit permanent establishment rules and contrive tax advantage by having deductions that lack economic substance. I am getting some advice about that, but I'm satisfied in the interim that we already have those sorts of rules in the Income Tax Act.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, James Shaw.
To the Minister, what does he have to say to New Zealanders and domestic businesses who are paying their fair share of taxes while international businesses that are operating in New Zealand can avoid them?
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Michael Woodhouse.
Mr Speaker, putting aside that I don't absolutely agree with the second part of the question, I think all New Zealanders would agree that it's appropriate that everybody, regardless of their ownership, pay their fair share of tax on transactions that take place here in New Zealand, and that I'm confident that we have good policies to enable that to occur, good resources deployed to check compliance with it, and where there are improvements that can be made, they will be.
Question number 5.